Hey, it's Rund. On this month's Throughline Plus episode, we're taking listeners behind the scenes of our episode on Bad Bunny and how the mega pop star got so political. To listen and get access to sponsor-free listening, sign up for Throughline Plus at plus.npr.org/Throughline. This is America in Pursuit, a limited-run series from NPR and Throughline. I'm Rund Abdelfattah. Each week, we bring you stories about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in the U.S. that began 250 years ago. In 1911, a deadly fire broke out in a factory in Manhattan where hundreds of workers, mostly young immigrant women, were employed. On the night the fire broke out, the building's exit doors were locked.
The owners of the company had closed some of the other doors to prevent people from stealing.
And the building became a trap for the workers inside. Bystanders started to gather in the streets
And witnessed the first of the women jumping out of the windows to escape the flames.
On that night, 146 workers died. 62 of them jumped to their death. It was the worst industrial accident in New York City up until that point, and hundreds of people witnessed it, including a young woman named Frances Perkins. What she saw disturbed her and led her on an epic journey that would ultimately transform the country.
The things that she created remain fundamental pieces of our social security and safety net today. Without her, what would we have? It's hard to even imagine.
Frances Perkins did so much in her lifetime. She was the first woman to serve in the presidential cabinet, creating programs that have transformed the way we all live today. Social Security, unemployment insurance, the 40-hour work week. She's behind all of that. Today on the show, how Frances Perkins reimagined the nature of work and helped build the country's social safety net. That's coming up right after a quick break. After the factory fire in 1911, Frances Perkins went to work. She and other activists in New York pushed for a commission to investigate what happened and proposed regulations to prevent it from happening again. And then she started making recommendations on how to change things permanently.
Some of the things that they got done are smoking in factories banned. They established a requirement that factories should have automatic water sprinklers. They required safe fire escapes. They required adequate elevators. They required the thing that we all completely live with all the time now is requiring exit signs so we know how to get out and make our way to safety in the event of a fire.
This is Kirsten Downey, author of The Woman Behind the New Deal, The Life and Legacy of Frances Perkins.
And she started really to become an expert on all aspects of labor law administration. Think of how many times in your life something has felt kind of overcrowded or you feel a little nervous and you look around and you look for that exit sign, you know how to get out. That's Frances Perkins' work.
And people took notice. At this point, she was in her 30s, living in New York, married with kids. And there was a new governor in town.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt, or as he's known today, FDR. Frances Perkins had first met him at a social event years before.
And she thought he was a huge loser. He had lots of ambitions without a lot of talent to back it up, in her opinion.
But even so, she acted as a political advisor to FDR during his campaign for governor of New York. During that time, she got to know a different version of the man. In the years since she'd first met him, he contracted polio and now used a wheelchair.
And that is when she said she felt a real change in him, that polio had knocked him between the eyes. He had suffered, and suddenly she felt that he had matured and that he had learned to care about people in a way that he had never done so before.
This go-around, they became fast friends.
They got along marvelously. They had very similar senses of humor, and they enjoyed a lot of the same sort of things.
With her help, FDR won the governorship, and he rewarded Frances by making her New York's industrial commissioner, one of the most powerful officials in the state. Frances got to work, and she got results. And then...
This is a day of national consecration.
After 4 years as governor, FDR turns around and runs for president of the United States, and he wins. About 10 days before he officially took office, FDR asked Frances Perkins for a meeting.
The newly elected president called her to his townhouse in New York City.
She arrives and is escorted to one of the many rooms in the house.
This is a wood-paneled room. The door opened.
Roosevelt said to me, "I guess you know what I want you for."
He got pretty much directly to the point and said, I'd like you to be my Secretary of Labor.
He said, "I really mean it, Frances."
She responds by being coy.
Of course I made the usual courteous remarks about how honored and surprised I was. He said, "Oh, come on now. Don't say surprised. You're no fool."
She had a little list of programs and priorities in her pocket. She hands him the list and she says, "You don't want me for your Secretary of Labor unless you want me to do these things."
And what we know it was on that list was work hour limitations, ban on child labor, minimum wage, unemployment insurance, Social Security.
He looked at the list and he agreed to basically everything except
unemployment insurance and Social Security.
At that point, of course, he begins to object by saying, "You know, Frances, I don't believe in the dole, and I never will."
She said, "Frances, that's crazy."
She didn't think so, but she dropped it for the moment and focused on the decision she had to make. If she accepted, she'd be the first woman cabinet secretary in American history.
And she was so frightened that she would ruin everything for other women. She felt that she would somehow mess up and that no other woman would be invited to this position again for many, many years. She went to her bishop to actually ask whether or not he thought she should take the job.
He wrote to her,
"You know, if you were a soldier and you had a talent that could save the nation during war, wouldn't it be your moral responsibility to serve? We need you." And so she felt as if God had called her to it and that she did not really have a choice.
She called FDR and accepted the job.
When Frances Perkins arrived in Washington, D.C. in 1933, her very presence made an impact.
When she becomes Secretary of Labor and joins the cabinet, it's also odd to people that they don't even know what to call her. You know, what do you call a woman in that role? And so they came up with the idea of calling her Madam Secretary.
Madam Secretary Perkins was taking over a department that people in Washington barely thought about.
She found the Labor Department when she arrived to be almost defunct, very quiet, very few people working.
But with FDR's blessing, she was going to change that.
That meant that she could reshape it.
So she worked the room. She knew how to work the politicians in Washington, D.C.
But this was D.C. in the 1930s. To say it was a boys' club would be an understatement.
Within the cabinet, she was worried that she would be viewed by her fellow cabinet members as an intrusive woman or a silly woman, and so she wanted to be taken very seriously. She was very calculating about how she was going to operate politically with men.
She had this folder full of papers that she called Notes on the Male Mind.
One of the things that she came to conclude is that men would take women more seriously if they reminded them of their mothers, that they respected their mothers, they would not sexually harass their mothers, and that they might listen to the opinions of their mothers. So Frances started dressing like their mothers. And it's calculating, it's manipulative, and it's extremely effective.
Almost right away, she became one of the most important members of the cabinet.
FDR always listened to her. And this is something we know because one of her fellow cabinet members, Secretary Ickes, wrote in his own diary that the men in the room would get frustrated with Frances Perkins lecturing, and yet the president was always at rapt attention to her.
The people are what matter to government, and a government should aim to give all the people under its jurisdiction the best possible life.
When the Roosevelt administration began in 1933, the United States was in the middle of the worst economic calamity in its history, what we today call the Great Depression.
One of the horrors of the Great Depression is that it exposed a lot of the dark realities of the workplace.
Especially for older people.
It had been bad for everybody, but had been even worse for the elderly. People would see elderly people eating out of trash cans. They were starving to death. They needed to have a system that would provide some income support for people when they get to the phase of their lives where they're simply less employable.
And Frances Perkins saw an opportunity. FDR had rejected the idea of Social Security when she first proposed it, but not now.
Just as the fire had been a crisis that was a buildable moment, so the Great Depression was.
You've had a streak of bad luck. We're going to deal the cards over again. We'll have a new deal.
In 1935, FDR signed the Social Security Act into law.
It was an appeal to Lady Luck, with the hope that springs in every man's heart when you say, I'll give you some new cards.
Social Security was the crown jewel of Frances Perkins' ideas. Here's how it works.
You pay into Social Security when you're young and strong so that you can get it when you're old and frail. It wasn't charity. It's you worked for it, you earned it, you'll get it later. It's an insurance system. It's not an entitlement.
It wasn't, as FDR had once put it, the dole. But many people in America thought Social Security was a huge government overreach as creeping socialism into the United States, a point Frances Perkins disputed.
What we intended to do was not to turn over the pattern of American life. What we did was to correct certain obvious defects. It's just as though when you have a leaky pipe, you mend the pipe. You don't pull out the plumbing.
Social Security helped pull millions of elderly people out of poverty.
Perkins considers this her single biggest victory of her life.
But it wasn't the only victory. Over the next few years, nearly every idea Perkins had presented to FDR before taking the job became law. Unemployment insurance, restrictions on child labor, minimum wage, work hour limitations. Whether she intended to or not, Frances Perkins had imagined a new America and made it a reality.
Most people generally have a really hard time imagining what could be. They only know what is. But what Perkins had was a great imagination for what could be and what would be the steps involved in getting there.
Frances Perkins would stay in FDR's cabinet until his death in 1945, just months before the end of the war.
She still remains the longest-serving Secretary of Labor in American history. Eventually, She became a lecturer at Cornell University and spent the rest of her career there until her death in 1965.
That's it for this week's America in Pursuit. If you want to hear the full story of Frances Perkins, check out the full-length episode, The Woman Behind the New Deal. And be sure to join us next week when we revisit a difficult time in U.S. history, Japanese internment during World War II, an internment that changed the lives of many people, including a woman named Yuri Kochiyama.
She talked to a lot of people inside the camps. She listened to discussions of more politicized Japanese Americans inside the camps. And I would say she started to grow a social consciousness, a sense that problems in the United States had social and structural origins.
The story of civil rights activist Yuri Kochiyama. That's next week. Don't miss it. This episode was produced by Kiana Moghadam and edited by Christina Kim with help from the Throughline production team. Music by Ramtin Arablouei and his band Drop Electric. Special thanks to Julie Kane, Irene Noguchi, Beth Donovan, Casey Miner, and Lindsay McKenna. I'm Rand Abdel Fattah. Thanks for listening.